Retirement Tips Radio is brought to you by Business RadioX, the voice of business in your community. Currently serving over 25 markets, the Business RadioX network is growing fast. We're teaming up with retired execs and established entrepreneurs to support and celebrate local business leaders. If you'd like to make additional income while making a difference, discover more at brxteam.com. Now, here's your host.
Lee Cantor here, another episode of Retirement Tips Radio, and this is going to be a good one. Today we have Laurence Kotlikoff with us, and he is with Maxifi Planner. Welcome, Laurence.
It's great to be with you, Lee. Thanks for having me.
Before we get too far into things, tell us about Maxifi. How are you serving folks?
I'm a professor of economics at Boston University, and I started my company back in 1993. So we're 27 years old. And what we're trying to do with our software, it's personal financial planning software, and we're trying to provide the economics approach to financial planning, which is dramatically different from, indeed it can't be more different because it's producing exactly the opposite recommendations from conventional financial planning. So economics has been in this business of providing financial advice, really, personal financial advice for about 100 years. It's just that it hasn't really been provided to the public. It's been kind of provided to economists by other economists via research. But we've been working on this topic, and many Nobel Prizes in economics have been given for work in personal finance, actually. So I've tried and I think succeeded in our software, which is called MaxifiPlanner.com, to provide the economics approach. So that's how I'm here speaking with you.
So now, can you explain to our listeners the difference between the economic approach to financial planning as opposed to, the stockbroker that keeps calling me with the great tip approach that seems to be more prevalent, and the guy that wants to have a steak dinner with me to help me?
Well, there's a couple different levels, but let me just get to the basic issue of retirement planning. Suppose you're a 45-year-old household and you go to your financial planner or you go to traditional financial planning software. The first question out of their mouths is going to be, how much do you want to spend in retirement? Give us your retirement spending goal. That's an impossible question for anybody to answer. They need to know all kinds of things about their taxes and Social Security benefits and Medicare Part B premiums, and it's just impossible to give an answer. My answer to that question would be $1 billion a day. That's my goal. I'd like to spend $1 billion a day. Now, so that right away is telling you that you have to have spending that's in line with what you can afford. So economics says that what people are really after is not some unaffordable goal, but they want to have a smooth living standard given their resources. They don't want to be starving today and splurging in the future, or the opposite. They want to have a smooth ride because, it's quite clear that we get satiated. If we had to eat all the steaks we're ever going to eat today, we would be sick of steak after about 5 minutes. But we'd really like to spread out all the steaks over time, or whatever, mushrooms if we're vegan. So that's what our software does. It takes in inputs about your resources. It doesn't ask you what you'd like to do. It figures out what you can do such that you can sustain your living standard right through the end of your days if you live to your maximum age of life. And then once you have this living standard calculated, so we got a living standard machine, then the program can find safe ways to raise it. So the first job of economics, of financial planning, is to personal financial planning, is to figure out what you can spend such that you don't run out, so you can maintain your living standard. The second job is to try and maximize that living standard safely. And there's all kinds of ways that our software can help you do that. For example, maximizing your Social Security benefits, minimizing your taxes with respect to using retirement accounts. When should you withdraw? Which accounts should you withdraw from, Roth or non-Roth first? Should you contribute to one or the other? Should you do Roth conversions? Should you annuitize your retirement account withdrawals? But also, should you downsize your home? How much will that raise your living standard? Should you work longer? It helps you figure out, if I work a couple more years, how much would that let me spend more? How much more will that let me spend through time? So we have a real living standard machine that can be used to answer all kinds of questions in personal finance. And then when you get to the issue of investing, what economics says is that you're going to invest and modify your spending every year in response to how you do on the market. You're not going to just sit there and watch the market drop to, if let's say you have half your money in the stock market and the market crashes 80%, you're not going to continue to spend as if it hadn't. You're going to adjust your spending annually at least, in light of what's happened to you. So that's what our software is simulating, the ups and downs to your living standard associated with investing at risk. So we're showing those variations and also helping people figure out what's going to make them happiest in terms of what portfolio to hold, given their degree of risk aversion. And economists call this expected utility maximization. It's something that everybody in finance has been working on. Every finance professor is an economist, basically. They all have PhDs in economics. They've been working on this for years. Ours is the first software to really bring this to the public.
Now, when you're a lay person and you don't have a PhD in economics and you're not that savvy maybe with finance, and you're just kind of grinding, and every day or every month you're putting money in your 401k, you're working, and a retirement's approaching, and all of a sudden you start having these realizations. I got to start planning for this. It's coming whether I plan or not. So one way or another, I'm going to have a retirement plan, right? And then the variables I'm having to deal with, I don't know how long I'm going to live. That's hard now to project. And I don't know what my health situation is going to be in a year, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. And then you couple that with my spouse and what my needs of my kids are going to be. And, if I have enough wealth, then maybe I can even think about a legacy. How do you kind of reconcile all of these variables when you're coming up with a plan in the way that you're recommending via software?
Well, actually, the software handles all those things. Just the way economics says to handle them. First of all, on the issue of your lifespan, how long you're going to live, economics says that you have to plan to live to your maximum age of life. You can't count on dying on time at your life expectancy. So let's use your maximum age of life as your planning horizon. But if you're not super, if you're willing to take a risk, the way economics says you should handle that is to specify in our software that you want to spend relatively more when you're young and less when you're old. You take a risk that when you're older, if you live a long time, you'll have a lower living standard. So we have something called the standard of living index that you can set, and it just tells the program what kind of a pattern of your living standard you'd like to have as you age. But the level of your living standard is being determined by what you can afford, not what you would, not your desired target. Again, my target is $1 billion a day. If somebody asks me what would I love to, what's my target? It's a ridiculous, stupid question. That's the key question in standard personal finance. Now, a legacy, if you want to leave money for your kids as a gift, you can put that in as a special expense. Any off-the-top fixed expenses, be it tuition, be it alimony payments, be it housing expenses, be it taxes, they're treated as given. And the software is determining your living standard based on your discretionary spending, the money you have left over to spend out of your lifetime resources. It figures out how to smooth those resources so that you have the same living standard discretionary spending per household member through time. So we can handle all these issues very easily and very naturally.
But doesn't economics assume a certain level of kind of rational decision making? And in life, sometimes people make irrational choices.
Well, yeah, we have people making what appear to be really ridiculous decisions, partly because they don't have the tools to make the right decisions. That's what I would argue. I mean, for example, if you're being asked to set a target for spending in retirement, you might set the target too low, in which case you're going to be, in effect, told to spend more than you should. Then you show up at retirement and bingo, your living standard drops because you haven't saved enough. But it's all because of this methodology of making you plan for yourself. Or you may set your target too high and basically, end up consuming very little, saving like crazy. You might also be induced to invest in risky securities to make a target that's unrealistically high and not really understand the living standard risk. Whereas our software says if you're going to invest in risk, we're going to show you how your living standard is going to evolve through time, the ups and the downs, and figure out how this affects your lifetime happiness. There's a measure called lifetime expected utility that economists focus on. Our software is the only one that actually programming the entire planet or universe, as far as we know, that actually calculates lifetime expected utility and can do expected utility maximization over your portfolio choice. So that taking into account how risk averse the person, your client is, or you yourself are, if you're using the software personally. So there is I guess I'm trying to say in 10 seconds here very quickly that we have an established theory in economics. It just hasn't been made public. And this software is like a lifetime project of mine to make economics personally useful, make it really, and everybody who's reviewed our software, from Nobel laureates on down, and people in the press written about, New York Times and other top publications have written about us quite a bit, have routinely ranked our software to be the best out there. So I'm not just trying to make a sales pitch here because that's not my goal. It's that it's a very different approach, but it's exactly what economics says to do.
And then, so now walk me through, when's the right time for me to invest in the software?
Well, it can be used at any age. If you're, let's say, 30 and you're trying to figure out, should I switch careers? I have to give up some money in earnings because I'm going to have to go and get a master's in English. Okay. So I've got my current profile, my base profile has me staying in my current job, teaching in high school with my BA in English. But now I'm thinking about, should I get an MA in English? It's going to take 2 years. There's tuition costs. It's going to affect my whole path of taxes. It's going to affect my whole path of Social Security benefits. Even Medicare Part B premiums could be different. My entire path of savings, my asset income, that's going to affect all the federal and state taxes. How do you figure all this stuff out? It's impossible. But the program can do it in a half a second. So you'll set up profile A that says, I'm just going to stay as I am. Profile B is I invest in this job alternative career, and you get to see which living standard is going to be higher. You get to compare apples to apples. My lifetime spending, discretionary spending, is going to be higher if I do career A versus B. And we've actually done that, and it turns out the master's program generally does not pay for itself. And an example would be comparing being a primary care physician, PCP, with being a plumber. Right out of high school, going right into plumbing as opposed to going to college and then to medical school and then getting a residency or an internship and residency, and finally getting to work and having to pay very high taxes on income that's high, but it's going to be taxed higher than since it's all compressed, you're going to put yourself in a very high tax bracket. Well, it turns out on a lifetime basis that the two careers produce almost the same discretionary spending over the lifetime. And people need to think about that. I'm not saying people should not become doctors. People go into medicine for more than just the money. But if that's a consideration, you need to understand what it is you're buying into when you go take on becoming a doctor.
And when you're parenting a child and you're trying to coach them on the right career path.
Exactly. Yeah. And also, does college pay off? What if you're middle-aged? Should I take this mortgage that comes with points or this other mortgage that doesn't? Can I afford this house? How much is it going to affect my discretionary spending if I buy this size house versus that size house, this, house of this price or that price? All these questions, every question in personal finance comes down to your living standard. Whether it's how risky is my living standard going to be if I invest in a risky manner and more in stocks relative to bonds. How much can I raise my living standard by working longer? How does moving to Texas affect my living standard because there's no taxes in Texas and I live in Connecticut? All these things can be analyzed very quickly in our software.
Now, in the software, like you mentioned, moving even state to state or even to different countries, and you talk about the tax rate, for making that move. Is that something I have to know all of those tax rates, or is that something the software kind of figures out and ballparks it?
Handles all the federal and state income taxes, including DC, internally. It doesn't handle British taxes, so we're not set up. Although people can kind of jury rig our software to look at moving to England, but for most Americans, they're not going to be really thinking about moving abroad. It can be used to think about, should I take a job? I live in Kansas City. Should I move to Seattle? I'm 55. They offered me a job, but I don't want to move again. Housing's a whole lot more expensive. There's no state income tax in Washington State. That's a good thing. But there's also no 401k plan, or not a very good one in the new job offer, but it's got a higher salary. How does that compare with my living standard if I stay in Kansas City? The program can answer that. Nobody else can. No other program can do that.
Now, is the software sold as a one-time I buy the software? Or is this kind of software as a service, a subscription that as it gets updated, I'm getting the latest updates?
It's a software as a service. You get the latest updates. The basic price is $139 for our premium household version, and for financial planners, it's $499 the first year. That the update, and then you buy an update if you want every year. You get another year's license, and your software, your inputs are still there. So we don't. If you could wait for a couple of years and update again, but most people get hooked on this because they find safe ways to raise their living standard, and we're talking about tens to hundreds of thousands of dollars that you can get just by doing absolutely safe things like waiting till 70 to take Social Security rather than taking it at 62. Understanding what you're giving up by making one choice versus another with Social Security. I mean, there's no risk there really associated with making one decision versus the other. Downsizing is not a big. There's no financial risk particularly. Moving states, not a big financial risk. Working longer in a job you already have that you can keep working at, no risk. So there's tons of ways before you start playing around with the stock market, of making money safely, of raising your living standard. And I've done retirement redos for people that or with the software, just to illustrate the software, where you can increase somebody's living standard by 50% without any risk whatsoever.
Now, is there any low-hanging fruit for somebody that is kind of nervous about their upcoming retirement? Is there some things you would do first? Obviously, buy the software, invest in the software, but any kind of rule of thumb for a person to kind of allay some of the fears they have as the market is so volatile nowadays, and with the crisis between the pandemic and the social unrest and all the stuff that's happening?
Rule of thumb would be to redo your plan based on where your assets are and where your labor income is, because a lot of people have lost their jobs. This may be the time to do, if you can afford it, to do Roth conversions. You may want to think about, and you can investigate this in our software, paying off your mortgage by cashing out your 401k, because right now the 401k money is yielding on a risk-adjusted basis nothing, zero. The long-term inflation index bond return is zero. And so the stock market adjusted for risk is yielding nothing. So why not, rather than paying 3.5% on a mortgage, when the inflation rate's likely to be 1.5%, so you're losing a real return there. Why not earn 2% real by cashing out some of your 401k money and using it to pay off your mortgage now? You can analyze that in our software. I wrote a piece for Forbes. I write columns for Forbes. It's posted at Maxifi.com. There was I showed for a typical household that doing this cashing out of your 401k and paying off the mortgage could produce a major increase in lifetime discretionary spending. I think it was like around $80,000, if I recall correctly, and with no risk. And even, and that takes into account the fact you have to pay more taxes sooner. This year you have to pay more taxes because you're in you're cashing out of 401k that's taxable cash out. So, but on balance, this matters. And so paying off, trying to get a safe, high return these days, the way to do that is to pay off debts, because the interest rate on those obligations is much higher than you can get by investing safely. So there's an arbitrage opportunity here, and right now that people should take advantage of. You might want to just reduce your contributions to retirement accounts and pay off your mortgage. That way, pay it off more rapidly. All these things can be investigated with the software. So paying down debts, adjusting your spending downward in light of the fact that you have maybe lost your job or your wages have been reduced, thinking about retiring later because you've been out of work, you're going to be out of work for maybe 6 months or a year or 2 years, the way things are going. Maybe downsizing your home at this point, or moving in with your kids, or having your kids move in with you to save all this stuff. Every single thing can be looked at.
This software sounds like it's giving me kind of a sounding board to play out different scenarios in a pretty quick and painless way, that any kind of fear I might have or any kind of idea I might have regarding this, I can just plug into the software and it's going to help me kind of see some choices.
Yeah, you can set up really endless scenarios for yourself if you have a household license, or for your clients if you have a professional license. And then the first thing to do is try and find all the safe ways you can. First of all, you're going to get a game plan. Here's how much to spend. Here's how much to save. Here's how much life insurance to buy so that survivors have the same living standard to the dollar for the rest of their lives if you died this year. That's an important game plan. And then second thing to do is how do we optimize this game plan? How do we get the living standard to be higher? How do we get more taxes, more benefits from Social Security, pay lower taxes by utilizing retirement accounts? How do we think about let's think about when we really should retire. Let's optimize over that. Think about what it's going to cost and be able to see what it's going to cost in terms of our living standard to retire early. Let's think about whether the house is really costing us more than we think. Let's think about downsizing it and how much that would matter. Let's think about moving to a state that's lower taxes, or maybe has lower housing prices. So all this stuff you do, and then you turn to the issue of analyzing the riskiness of your living standard with respect to investing at risk. So it's kind of like a three-step process. Figure out where you're going, optimize it, and then risk evaluate it.
And then just adjust it over time, periodically.
Yeah. And then, and some people definitely get hooked on this because it's addictive to be able to figure out safe ways to make money. And it's like a little bit of a game. Can I sit down today and try this or that? If I'm trying to do Roth conversion, how much should I do every year for the next 5 years, for example? Well, you have to run some different scenarios and see. But at the end of the day, people are going to make tons of money compared to the $139 it's going to cost them for this program.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, if somebody wanted to learn more, what's the website one more time?
Just Maxifi.com, Maxifi.com. And we have great customer support. There's tons of learning tools there. There's there's case studies. If you go down to the bottom of the website, you'll see a link to case studies. There's testimonials. You'll see what people think about it. There's articles I've written. There's a webinar series we've been doing that you can click on and watch a whole bunch of webinars. And then once you're running the program, there's a help center. So plus we have great customer support. You can always send us a ticket and we'll be right back to you on any needs you have.
Good stuff. Well, Laurence, congratulations on all the success. It sounds like this is quite an achievement. It's going to help a lot of people.
Thanks so much for having me, Lee, and love to be back with you talking about personal finance.
All right. This is Lee Cantor. We will see you all next time on Retirement Tips Radio.
Retirement Tips Radio is brought to you by Business RadioX, the voice of business in your community. Currently serving over 25 markets, the Business RadioX network is growing fast. We're teaming up with retired execs and established entrepreneurs to support and celebrate local business leaders. If you'd like to make additional income while making a difference, discover more at brxteam.com.